You're watching HFO-TV.
First, I'd like to introduce Lake Oswego attorney Chris Robinson. He's been practicing for over 35 years, and his focus is representing clients in complex property tax matters, including tax analysis, strategy, and dispute resolution. In 1987, he founded the Property Tax Analytics Company, a property tax consulting company. He's also a member of the Association of Washington Businesses, the Institute of Property Taxation, and the Appraisal Institute. Chris is going to talk to you a little bit about property taxes and related in Clark County.
First of all, good afternoon, and thanks to HFO for the opportunity to speak to you today. My world is property tax. That's all I do. Kind of fell into it serendipitously. I was corporate counsel to an S&L in the Willamette Valley during one of the other real estate crashes, and ended up negotiating deeds in lieu and foreclosure on commercial real estate. We'd get these properties back with high values, and many times property taxes were unpaid. And so it became part of my responsibility to address that issue on behalf of the bank. And, I kind of looked around and I said, this is kind of fun, and I didn't really know anybody else was doing it. So that's how that all happened. We do have a couple of people here, Ronnie Batten and Mark Rockenstein from Clark County, and they tell me that value change notices are going to come out for Clark County on June 14th. So this is a timely event. And it's a 60-day right of appeal, so when you get those value change notices, you do need to act on them right away. Don't wait until the 55th day or the 59th day to deal with it, because you miss the deadline, you're out of luck. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the process. First of all, you always, when you get your value change notice, you have the opportunity to go to the assessor, meet with the staff appraiser, talk about the valuation, talk about the specifics of your property. You should be prepared to bring your operating statements and rent rolls and so forth. It's an income property. So you can have a discussion and see if you can just work something out informally. And then the formal process starts with a petition with the county board. How many of you have ever filed an appeal? Okay, not very many. It's a pretty, doesn't take, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to file a property tax appeal. It is an administrative process. You don't have to be a lawyer to do it. It just happens to be my area of expertise. You have the county board of equalization, and then you have a state board. It's appointed, if you have a large appeal, you can appeal up to the state board either informally or formally. Washington is different than Oregon on burden of proof. Washington requires clear, convincing, and cogent evidence by the taxpayer. The burden is on the taxpayer to overcome the assessor's valuation. That's a very high burden of proof. In Oregon and most other jurisdictions, the burden of proof is merely a preponderance of the evidence. So if you have 51%, the assessor has 49%. By law, you win in Oregon and in most jurisdictions. So this is something that you need to be aware of, because when you do prepare your case, you need to keep that burden of proof, that standard in mind. Washington also has a preference for the sales comparison approach. So even though it's an income property, the primary emphasis will be on the sales comparison approach. So you have on your table information from HFO that shows some historical sales since 2012. You see the range of cap rates, which are fairly broad. I think I saw a low cap rate of 6 and then a high of about 9.5. So the range is fairly high. In terms of costs and fees, there's no cost associated with filing the board appeal. In terms of consultants or representatives or attorneys, some charge hourly rate. Almost all of our practice is on a contingency fee. which most tax consultants and representatives rely on. And what that means is if you're successful in getting a tax reduction, getting an adjustment in the value, then the representative takes a percentage of the tax savings or refunds. And if you're not successful, then there's no fee. You may want to get a fee appraisal, and that cost of that fee appraisal would be quite broad depending on the complexity of the property. But for apartments, you know, you can see fees maybe from $3,500 to as high as maybe $12,000. I have one right now where the fee for the appraisal is $12,500, but it's a 324 unit complex, and so in a lot at stake. Now the question is, well, is there any basis to appeal? And so if you have properties, multifamily properties, which I imagine you are involved in some way or another, otherwise you wouldn't be here, is the importance of putting together a package, and when you get that value change notice, going through the information to see if you know kind of what the range of cap rates are, and you can look at the property's net operating income and say, you know, is there just kind of as a first look, is there something to do? And if you have access, you know, real estate data is now so much more available than it used to be. You have CoStar and you have services from the brokerage houses that have information available in terms of both cap rates and what apartments are selling on a per unit basis. I think one of the questions that this group had, at least I heard, was the increase in the tax rate or the levy rate. And I might let Mark from Clark County speak to that. So maybe you can clarify why we're seeing an increase in the levy rate, and perhaps when values are dropping, taxes are not really being reduced. So Mark, do you just have a quick comment on that?
Washington State is a balanced budget state. So as values go down, the tax rate will go up because we're still paying the same amount for the services. As values go up, the tax districts do not have a windfall of additional taxes. They lower the tax rates, so those tax rates are compensating to that value. So there's still only so much budget they're trying to service. And all those budgets are limited to, right now in state, a 1% increase per year. And a lot of the taxing districts have chosen not to take any increase to keep the taxes as reasonable as possible. When most of the services are human resources in a government organization, you know, let alone the copy paper that we go through in a month, you can imagine. It's pretty tough to keep those budgets so stable. So, but that's how the tax rate is determined, based on the total amount of assessment versus the budgets of those taxing districts. There isn't a windfall or a shortage then as taxes or values change. Okay? The only exception is levy rates that gets passed, levies that get passed in an area. If the school district hasn't passed their levy for a while, the taxes are going to drop. When they do pass it, that's going to be added back onto those tax rates. I'm not seeing a lot of changes in the values. They're pretty stable. We're seeing the multifamily come up a little bit because the market's coming up. And what's going to happen is, that's the one catch, is that all the taxes have to be changing a lot to affect the levy rate so much. I'm sorry I'm using my hands on demonstrating this, but you know, if a lot of the district is commercial property and it's not changing the value, but the multifamily is going up, yeah, you would see a little bit more, because that multifamily going up isn't going to affect that overall assessment as much to affect the levy rate. So it's a combination, not just multifamily. You've got the residential, the commercial markets all going into that same thing, that same equation to balance the budget. So we're going to see a little bit of increase. Multifamily is doing better this year than it has in the last few years. We're trying to keep our values to market value, and we're not seeing, the levy rate may drop a little bit, so your taxes should be close to the same. They may be a little bit of increase. They shouldn't be dramatic. We're not seeing, you know, the 2001, 2002, when values were shooting up. We're seeing this as a little more stable, short increases at this point. So, and we're trying to use historical data as much as possible as well, in respect of, let's see the proof before we're starting to go charging after these values. Yeah. If you've got the sales out there, then that's what we're looking for. And in the state of Washington, most counties do attempt to do an annual assessment. Okay, however, it's impossible under any circumstance to bid out and physically look at every property. So we're doing statistical analysis on the properties we're not looking at on a physical basis. Right now, Clark County is attempting to look at properties on a 3-year basis instead of the required 6. The idea is that we can respond to the market faster, especially in these last couple of years as they were coming down. We can be out there looking at the market and making sure we're staying with it. And as they go up, it prevents a large increase. If we only did it once every 6 years as we had in the past, we started seeing increases of 50% in value. And that's where a lot of people got real excited real fast, because that's what they're looking at first is the value, then the taxes.
Right.
Yeah. So. Okay.
Thanks, Mark. I know I've got just a minute or so here, but I want to talk about the review process a little bit more. That's what my company does, my firm does. So we gather the information from you, we'll review it. You can do the first look. I mean, obviously, if you've got a concern, or on the other hand, if you think it's fairly assessed, then great. But if you have a concern, this is really a cost-effective way. You can't, kind of a can't-lose proposition. If there's nothing there, you're not out any money. In terms of our market area, I don't know if any of you have apartments in Oregon, but obviously we cover Oregon, California, Arizona, Nevada, and the state of Washington. I don't know if we have any affordable housing developers here or owners, but there have been a number of cases, been quite litigious over the last 12 years on the valuation of affordable housing, and that would be Section 42 properties and rural development properties. And we're still working through that. We actually got an announcement from the Department of Revenue to help clarify the valuation methodology for those properties, and that's been helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching HFO-TV. To learn more about HFO, call or visit our website. See new listings, apartment news, videos, and more when you download our apps at the Android and iPhone markets.